Hey guys, in this video I'm going to do a teardown and rebuild of my Glacern 5-inch Model 550 standard vise. And the reason for this is I was having a lot of binding while turning the handle counterclockwise to open the jaws. And I emailed Glacern on Saturday, not really expecting an answer until Monday because Saturday was the 4th of July. And that's pretty heavily celebrated here in the States. But I actually got a reply the same day, and we went back and forth a little bit. They sent me some diagrams and some information on how to rebuild it. And what they thought was that there was probably chips in between the screw and the nut. My feelings were that it was something wrong with the bearing, and it actually ended up being debris in the bearing. And I've already shot all the footage of the teardown and rebuild, so I'm not going to go into any of that now. You'll see it all here in just a second. But I wanted to do this little intro, and I'll just cut right into it. I do want to real quick say Glacern was fantastic. Not only did they email me back and forth on the 4th of July, but then on Monday, I got an email saying, hey, we'd like to give you a call and help you with getting this thing fixed. And the problem I was having was I couldn't remove this thrust collar. There are no flats and no spanner markings, so I kind of assumed it was pressed on. But they explained to me that it was actually threaded on, and we went over some options. They said they could get me some more bearings if I need. I'll go over those bearing numbers here in just a couple of minutes. And yeah, thank you very much. If you guys at Glacern are watching this, I appreciate the customer service. Really went the extra mile helping me out, and I'm back up and running already, and it seems to be running real smooth. I would also like to point out real fast that the rep that called me introduced himself as being from Glacern. I've always said Glacern, but it must be Glacern like a glacier, so from now on it's Glacern. Anyway, enough of that. I'll go ahead and cut the footage in right now, and we'll get started on this teardown. Step number one will be to remove the moving jaw, and what you'll need to do is there's a set screw down in here. Mine happens to be 4mm and 4mm Allen, and once you get that out, it looks like this. There's actually another set screw behind it, and that also was a 4mm Allen in my case, and it looks like this. Now, if your vise is not a Glacern, I wouldn't worry about it, because I was doing some research online trying to figure out how to remove this collar. And I noticed that Kurt vises, their design, or at least the exploded view for their vise, looks very similar, if not identical, to this vise. Now, I'm sure it's not identical per se, but I believe probably most machinist vises disassemble the exact same way and use a similar mechanism for the moving jaw that is pulled down into the vise as it's tightened. And I'll show you how that mechanism as well. Anyway, we'll get the two set screws off, and then let me just set those over here. And then the moving jaw just lifts right off. And if you flip it over and look down in here, you can see there's a tapered surface and a hole. And inside that hole is this half ball. And this half ball engages with a similar surface on the nut, which I'm blocking with my arm. So this surface on the nut. Okay, so this had some grease in there. It actually had two colors of grease. There was a lighter, kind of tannish colored grease that was fairly clean, and then there was a black, what I believe is probably like marine grease underneath the ball. And in fact, when I was reading online, I think both Glacern and Kurt and somebody else I looked up, they all suggested when you're reassembling these to use marine grease. Anyway, so there's the moving jaw. Set that aside. And then the next thing to do is, well, as far as troubleshooting goes, I was able to remove the nut, and that's how I knew that my problem wasn't with chips in the screw. Now this screw has a slit in it right here, and there were chips in that slit, and this needs to be thoroughly cleaned. I was able to brush some gunk and grease out of there. In fact, you can see it right there. See that chunkiness? So that's probably not an uncommon issue, and that could be the source of your binding. It wasn't the source of mine, because after I got the nut off, I still wasn't able to twist this counterclockwise, which is why I thought it was the bearing. To get the nut off, you're going to have to remove the fixed jaw, and in my case, it took a couple of large bolts. I believe these are 8mm. Yep, 8mm bolts on the bottom side, and the fixed jaw lifts right off. You can see it's just keyed in place. Once the fixed jaw is off, now we can slide the nut out. And if you look down in there, well, you may not be able to see it, it's pretty gross in there. So I'm going to spray some brake cleaner in there. I'll shoot some air in there, try and get it cleaned out as best I can, and then when I reassemble it, I'll just put on a nice coating of marine grease, and hopefully that'll seal that up. I don't know if there's a way to seal that any better. I mean, you couldn't really put an O-ring up here because it slides off the threads to some degree, so maybe some kind of sliding bushing back here. I don't know, but anyway, not too bad. And then here you can see that surface that the half ball runs up against. Okay, so the last thing to do is remove the screw. So the way I was able to do this was there's a set screw right here. I took that out, and while I was trying to get the collar off. To actually remove it, what I did was I just loosened the set screw a couple of turns, and then trying to hold the collar still. I didn't want to mar it with like a pipe wrench or anything. So holding the collar still with just the Allen wrench, I was able to use my my vise wrench, what do you call this? Handle. And I was able to tighten it like that, see? Or loosen it, I guess. And then once I got it turned a few times, it came right off. And it had something in the threads, which at first I thought were buggered threads. Using an awl, I could get in there and clean out this gunk, and it was really thick, almost like a... I kind of thought maybe it was like thread locker, but it was... You could roll it up almost like lead filings, is kind of what it felt like. But it was magnetic. I could actually pick it up with a magnet. So I'm wondering if it was, you know, like JB Weld is that epoxy that's got metal in it. I don't know. It could have been something like that. I'm gonna screw this back on with blue thread locker, and then I'll probably blue thread lock the set screw as well. But the threads are in great shape, and I've got them cleaned out pretty nicely. And then there's a Belleville washer, which I'm sure helps with preload, and this goes on, so it's this cupped direction like a cup. It goes on like that. Let's flip this over so we don't get confused. And then the screw slides right out the front. Now this has a 3-piece thrust bearing, which comes right off. There's a an O-ring on here, and I don't think I'll remove it. I think I'll just try and clean it out real good. And then I'll put a little marine grease on there. This was packed really well, had grease in it quite nicely actually. And there was actually a lot of debris that came out of here, and I'll show it to you. Now the part number for this is HIC. I'm guessing that's the bearing brand. If you can see that at the top. And then 51104. So I'll probably just order a couple extra of these. The Glassern rep that called me actually told me he'd send me new ones if these ones were bad. But this actually looks good. The race looks really good. There are no flat spots. I spent a lot of time looking over every ball. No flat spots, no scratches. So I really think it was just garbage was down in there. And in fact, this is the rag. This is the shop towel I used to clean it out. These two big black spots are the two bearing races. You can see there's lots of silvery particles there. And I wouldn't expect big chips to be able to get in there because they have to get past the seal. And then, let's see. Yeah, there's some other shiny pieces. There's a chip right there above my thumb. You see that shiny thing? There's a few other speckles on there. So I really do think that this is the problem. I'm going to put it back together. If there's any issues at all, I'll just order a couple more bearings. In fact, I may just go ahead and do that anyway. And yeah, I'm going to go ahead and finish cleaning everything. I want to clean the screw a little bit better. The nut needs to be cleaned, and then I've already wiped down the casting itself, and then I'll start reassembling it with grease and lube. So I'll probably not going to show you the process. I'll probably just bring you back once I've got it all put back together.